Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the We're Not Stumped podcast. I'm your host, Mike Bolland, and today we're talking to someone who has taken one of the most difficult personal battles a parent can face and turned it into a mission for justice and change. And this is Marc Fishman, a disabled father and civil rights advocate from New York who has spent years fighting not only for the relationship with his children, but for the rights of disabled parents across the country. After sustaining a traumatic brain injury, cognitive and hearing disabilities, Marc found himself navigating a family court system that repeatedly denied him of basic accommodations guaranteed under the Americans with Disabilities Act. His story includes federal ADA victories, public advocacy, and a relentless push for accountability, all while trying to be the father that his children deserve. Marc joins us today to share his journey, the barriers he's faced, and why he believes disability rights in family court is one of the most overlooked civil rights issues going on today. Marc, thank you so much for coming on the We're Not Stumped podcast.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for having me, and thank you to your audience and for your advocacy for the disabled community and educating those, who are unaware of the struggles a lot of us go through just for basic accommodations, or in my case, basic communication accommodations. So thank you for having me on and for all you do for advocating for the community.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, it's my pleasure. And that's one of the things I think we talk about the most within this podcast is advocacy and even self-advocacy. But man, you took it a step further. I mean, you're fighting for the rights of many other people. So a little bit of background. How did you find yourself in this position?
Sure. So I was driving my 8-year-old daughter to third grade elementary school. I have 4 kids. My eldest twin, Aiden, was in the back seat. He was 3.5 at the time. And, I was on a drop-off line in front of an elementary school on a descending hill in my 4-door sedan. And all of a sudden I was rammed by a security van owned by Allied Universal that was speeding down the hill. Hit me from the rear, whiplash, and, 24 surgeries, 2 neurostimulators, 8 implants, a lot of cognitive rehab, tinnitus, occipital neuralgia, which is 7 nerves in the neck, post-concussion syndrome, bursitis, injured to neck, back, torn rotor and cuff on the left shoulder, bruised knee, broken toe. I'm still here. So it's important for those of us who, survive traumatic events and go through this experience to communicate to others, about the communication needs we need.
That's unbelievable. I mean, the amount of injuries you sustained, that wasn't just a little love tap in the back, I take it. It must have been quite a bit of force.
It's a ram. My seat broke, the air conditioning and the electric broke. The rear trunk gashed the rear left tire. So, yeah, it was a heavy impact and commercial vehicle speeding, with 6 people in it. So figure, over 7,000 pounds, hitting you again on a descending hill. The school's located at the bottom of a hill in a 15 mile per hour. And it was actually turning into a parking spot. So it hit me with that turning radius. And, everyone has different injuries. I worked out with a trainer for 14 and a half years. So I had back muscles, thank God. They absorbed the impact, so I'm not paralyzed beneath the legs, but my injuries were all nerve. Everyone's heard of cubital tunnel syndrome. I'm sure you've heard of carpal tunnel syndrome. Yeah. Have you ever heard of cubital tunnel syndrome?
No.
So that's the elbow. So basically, when the nerves die as they pass the elbow, your lower fingers, your pinky and your second finger, get weak. You can't hold. So I had what's called ulnar nerve release, where they release the pressure on the nerve to restore movement and strength to your arm. And what often happens with a lot of these things, it doesn't exactly work. So for 38% of us, you got to go to PT. I lost more strength after I had the operation. I had to go to PT to get strength back. And right now the strength in the left, it's half what it is in the right. But again, I'm glad to be able to use left arm. Glad to be able to speak, as I went to cognitive rehab with a lot of people that had brain bleeds, strokes, a lot of veterans who were not here. So it's important to speak out for everyone, because traumatic brain injury is so misunderstood. And
yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Education's important, please.
No, and you are speaking out for a lot of people. How did you start to figure out, boy, this isn't working the way I needed to? Because you're going through the court system, and then things aren't being accommodated. When did when you first started to realize that this isn't the way it needs to go?
Well, family court isn't fun for anyone. Horrible for me. Court system's looking for someone to punish or hate, and the side effects of bad memory or not being able to hear, tinnitus, or not remembering numbers or remembering drop-off times or remembering verbal orders. It's troubling for anyone. But if you're disabled and you don't have what you've given me now, which is real-time transcription, like closed captioning on the screen, where I see the words as opposed to just hearing them, I register better. My left ear has a neurostimulator lead cord that goes about a half inch from my ear, and it's adaptive restorative electric therapy to the left side of my head, rear ear, neck, shoulder. And when it adapts, it adjusts higher, that ear goes numb. So I won't hear on the left. So if 2 or 3 people are talking at a cocktail party, I won't hear without reading lips. And fortunately, particularly with the advent of Zoom, and now captioning, you and I were discussing before, actually, in 21, those of us who use Zoom had to pay $200 an hour for this. The words tree take for granted. And one of the disability nonprofits, had to do a class action, and Zoom agreeing to make it free. But yeah, can you imagine having to pay $1,000 a week for basic communication?
No, that would be extremely difficult, especially with what I'm doing here today. That would be
There
I
you
wouldn't be
go.
able to afford it.
There you go. But most
Yeah.
people aren't aware, like in New York, they passed a law in 2015 called S5533B. Basically, what that says, if you're deaf or hard of hearing, and again, hard of hearing can mean anything. You're 10% hard of hearing, you're 30% hard of hearing, you have ringing in the ear as I do, you have a stimulator, or maybe you lost an ear, God forbid, in the war. That if you request what's called real-time transcription, CRT, computer assisted words on the screen, that the state court in New York will provide that at no charge to you, and that all of the courtrooms in New York have that pre-installed. So what that means, Mike, is New York, unfortunately, is the most litigious state. We have over 3,000 judges. You got a lot of courtrooms. So, in most cases, you really just need to click on a switch. Like you enable closed captioning, I just turn it on. No, in my case, the judge felt that I was faking my memory and hearing disability, Judge Michelle Shower. And she felt that I was too intelligent not to be able to remember or hear. And she said that her belief was that my memory and hearing impairment belies the record. And she actually threw me in jail for 3 weeks. In jail hospital, you can imagine, no criminal charge back then. It was, oh, Mr. Fishman, I told you there were no gifts to be sent to your kids, from March to July. I said, Your Honor, I probably didn't hear you. You denied my note taker. You denied my aid. You denied real-time transcription. I asked for all these things. Matter of fact, I have an advocate here who asked them also. You deny that. And you expect me to register your written word? I can tell you right now, I won't. You have the neuropsych test from Columbia. And for those of you unaware in the audience, what a neuropsych test is, it basically tests your memory and skills. And, fortunately for me, most of my skills are great, except for short-term memory, which in 2016 was in the 4th percentile of other 44-year-olds. Almost 9 years later, I can tell you I'm probably in 12%. But my point is that if you read the report, the Wechsler memory tests, rate complex figure, others, I'm simply not going to register what you need. And I didn't ask the court to pay for it. Like you and I were discussing out here in Nevada, California, Colorado, they provide a note taker. No, just let me bring in my aid. No, they can't have entry. No, if you can't take notes yourself, I guess you won't have notes. Your Honor, there's no court reporter here. It's digital and analog recordings. It takes 6 months to a year to get a transcript. Well, that's your problem. You can take notes. No, Your Honor, acute tunnel syndrome, I can't hold a pencil. I can't take my own notes. You won't let me have my iPad. So, Mr. Fishman belies the record. And she says, so you sent gifts on Easter, Passover, July 4th, kids' birthdays, and I told you there were no gift-giving holidays. Your Honor, your orders over here that I interpreted all say I could send gifts on holidays. She takes the microphone away. She goes off the records, and she puts up the finger, and she says, maybe F and in your family those are holidays for gift giving, but they're not. Guards sees him, take him to jail. 3 weeks.
That is absolutely insanity.
Isn't it unbelievable?
Yeah, absolutely. I was saying earlier when we were, for the audience that's listening now, we did have a little bit of a conversation before we started. And I was telling Mark that there's so much to this story, and I did a lot of research, but I appreciate it so much that you're coming on and telling some of this. And I just want to remind everyone who I'm talking to, because it's Marc Fishman. He can be found at newrochellepoliceabuse.com. If you really want to get into this story, which is unbelievable, I guess that's the only adjective I can think, go to that website. There's videos, there's television interviews that you've done, and all of the advocacy that you're doing. When did you realize that this was probably a bigger issue, not just for you, but for many, many others?
Oh, good question. I mean, certainly we all are retrospective. We look within. In my case, I was speaking very tangentially. I also couldn't register my own thoughts. I couldn't read more than 3 sentences without having a breathing problem. So, it was really self-awareness. Like here you are, you're trying to wonder why you're breathless after you tried to read one paragraph and you can't. So speech therapy after TBI really helped. And they developed a program again with Columbia where I was doing breathing exercises, deep breath in, and then starting to breathe out of my nose. If you can imagine, Mike, after recovery, it was like, I didn't breathe out of my nose. I breathed out of my nose. I got a massive headache. Yeah. So through the first 3 sessions, I had a massive migraine headache. We went to the ER. They gave me shots, and afterwards, like, okay, keep doing it, keep doing it. You're remembering to be able to breathe out of your nose. Suddenly, you get the habit. You don't get as bad headaches. My stimulator's adjusted so that the electric stimulation is adjusting the pain. Thankfully, it's adaptive restorative where you can program it. It's over 32 programs by Medtronic. And suddenly, you're able to say, wow, people really couldn't hear me. Or wow, did I really sound that way? Or wow, it's nice to be able to read 2-3 pages. You know, but it's really the awareness is that, when you went to look online, like through Facebook and others, and you're just seeing that, with disability, you basically have no chance to try to quit. You're denied 80% of the time. I think to answer your question, instead of going on a tangent, Robin Powell at Brandeis in Massachusetts. Robin is a professor at Brandeis as well as in Stetson Law. She included me in a study, 45 families going through this experience, and the statistics were horrible. The stories, and like in mine, it's amazing because I was smart, like you. I hired a disability advocate. I hired Donna Drum. God bless Donna Drum. She was an associate with David Bowie's. So David Bowie's, for your audience, is the Bush versus Gore, the butterfly bout recount. Bowie's represented Gore. So I hired someone who was the basic, how should I say, the Einstein of disability accommodations. So for 2 years, including 8 months before this jailing incident, Donna would come to me in court. It was $500 a day. Borrowed my best money I spent, and every time Judge Shaw would yell at me and say, "I'm not repeating the record. I'm not allowing you note taker," and she'd stand up and say, "You can't speak to them that way." And we're trying to take notes here. I'm trying to help him. He has a writing impairment, and and then Judge Shaw said to her, "Why are you representing this monster? This is just a domestic abuse. This is a wife beater. This is a rapist." And Donna was saying, all of the accusations with CPS were unfounded. As a matter of fact, in Mr. Fishman's case, I want to remind the court, they were unfounded in 6 weeks, Your Honor. You know why? Let me remind the court. His ex-wife accused him of strangling his twins in June of 2014 while picking them up from a gym. Mike, I'm sad to say, these fingers, particularly in 2014, couldn't squeeze anything. I had just had owner release. I couldn't hold the tennis ball. The keys would drop. So the idea that I would actually strangle anything was completely absurd. And of course, like you, they went to the videotapes at the gym. My kids were roughhousing. They were 2 4-year-olds. I was observing, trying to separate them. They were wild in the gym. I thought it was a supervised program. It was, but it was, do your own thing day. Mark gets blamed. Blamed for what? The fact that I had him in an after-school activity supervised. No one got hurt. But they were roughhousing. Twins roughhouse. Oh, but I strangled them? Or you abused them? Braisins? What? Really? In my condition, with a stimulator right here, you think I actually was able to lift an arm? Had to have help just to pick him in the car. What are you talking about? This is absurd. So, CPS cops in there like, what? talk to him with Jim. He's been coming here for 5 years. This is the biggest cheerleader parent ever, you know. So, the judge is pissed. Because there's videotape. This guy's disability. So he couldn't be guilty. You're not supposed to cheer for one side or the other. You're supposed to be a neutral arbitrator of law. But family court is not about neutral arbitration or mediation. It's about who is the parent we got to hate. So, like you said, in that experience with jail, what I said is, what am I doing here? I suddenly realized there's nothing left to lose. 8 cavity searches a day, an orange suit. I couldn't have a pillow, so I couldn't sleep because without elevating my head, my stimulator was racing electric. It was a torture, and I couldn't go outside. I was constantly guarded by nurses. Eventually, after 6 days there, they said, come on, the nurse isn't here. The 6 of us guards will take you outside. We see you've just been here. So majority of guards are decent, but it's like, how do you treat someone with multiple pain and stuff when, you put them in a jail cell, you rot? So sad to say, after I got out 2 weeks later, Mike, a day later I fell, went to the hospital. They looked at my neck and said, what do you got all these holes for? What's all these red marks? I said, I was in jail. They wouldn't give me a pillow. They wouldn't give you a pillow. You can't lie flat with your condition. I said, you think they care? You think the judge cares? This was part of her torture. So during that experience, I met other people in the hospital, jail hospital, and just could not believe after I was confronted by the warden to help all these people write reasonable accommodations. Like they were actually happy I was there to help them with the deaf prisoner, the person who didn't have a hand, the one who had PTSD. Oh, Mark, yeah, you can write this. Oh, we'll let Donna drum in. Oh, yeah, you can have as much visitation. This is great. You're writing all these accommodation people. I said, you guys don't have an agency to go to. You call Disability Rights New York. No one does. No one cares about them. You're great. You're putting spotlight on this. When you were put in here, I got 8 letters from the disability liaison for the county, from the nonprofits, all telling me, watch out, take care of Fishman. He's injured. This is great. I wish they did that for all my prisoners. He says, you shouldn't be here. He says, this isn't even a criminal charge. I know, Mike, you imagine? This is confinement. We're punished. We're punished. I got hit by a van. Battery on the left, battery on the right. This stimulator is for fibromyalgia, pain in the left rear nerves. This one's for sleep apnea. It's called Inspire. I cannot keep my jaw up at night. So I have like what a lizard or frog does. The tongue gets pushed out, zapped with a hypoglossal here. Okay. But Judge Shower, I'm not disabled. I'm faking it. Other court people, I'm faking it. Are you a doctor, Your Honor? No. Are you a nurse, Your Honor? No. You got a biology degree? No. Mr. Fishman, everything you say is a lie. Excuse me? What about what Donna says? Oh, she just a paid person to represent you because you're a monster. And Donna said, what are you talking about? You think I'd represent anyone if he hadn't have these disabilities? And so that precipitated, basically, after calling all these agencies for help while I'm being tortured by this judge, appealing her like crazy, finding out you can't appeal a temporary order in New York. You got to get a final order. She wouldn't give me a final order. So what I do during jail, I started writing my federal lawsuit pro se with Donna's help and others. And here we are, on July, let's see, July 16, 2021, the Federal Second Circuit ruled 2-sentence, Marc Fishman versus Judge Shower, New York Court Administration, Nancy Barry, 5 judges, the court administrator, the court system. The accommodations for Mr. Fishman's communication disability are granted. The court clerk is ordered to provide them. That's it. Dated.
Wow.
I didn't win money. I wanted to win the transcript cost of $50,000. I wanted to win the lawyer, but I won the order. And they didn't appeal it. They could appeal it to the Supreme Court. It's the Federal Second Circuit. Now, keep in mind, you and I go to the Supreme Court. We're not Trump, right? So our chance of getting in is under 1.5%. New York court system, New York State appeals, their chances are over 60%. Oh, you don't want to appeal. You don't want this subject to be talked about by 9 people because you know what? I have friends that are Democrats. I have friends that are Republican. I'm an independent. I support disability rights. If you support our cause, I support the person, not the party. But I don't care if you're purple, green, no hand, no arm, if you got, red hair. If you think that person with traumatic brain injury and hearing impairments shouldn't get a basic accommodation, which costs nothing, turn on the screen. The majority of federal judges are decent people. You know why, Mike? They're appointed by the president, and you need 100 senators to agree. A majority of the 100 senators, right? Look, we just had a government shutdown, Mike, right? Do the majority of the senators ever agree on anything? If they don't want to agree on anything, they don't. So for them to approve these judges like 90 votes to this one, 70 votes to this one, almost perfect. It says a lot. And so what I find is the ultimate fairness is federal court, district court, appeals court, Supreme Court. They're elected for life. They're very humble. I've never been cut off from a federal judge. They allow me to speak my turn, allow me accommodations, a note taker, an aide. They allow me to come to courtroom to prepare my desk, to make sure I have my papers out, and have helpers. Very polite, very kind. I wish I could say that for New York State Court of Family Court. You don't even get a chance to speak. They just cut you off. Hell with it. Note taker, who cares about your notes? Get a transcript. Your Honor, you didn't sign off the transcript. Oh, who cares? But, it takes months. How do you expect me to remember? Well, who cares? You have a disability. I have Miss Drum take notes. No, Miss Drum is helping me because every insult you give me, she has to object to. Mr. Fishman, I don't give you insults. You're a monster. And you will never see your kids unsupervised again as long as I'm the judge. Amazing, right? She still wears a robe. Judge Michelle Shower, Westchester family, hates disabled people, pattern disabled. You found she's done this to loads of them. Oh, and here's they really hate you, Mike. I wasn't working in 2018 when, Judge Ken Karras ordered the marshal to serve Judge Shower and the lady court people. So, so blue jackets and yellow lettering says, U.S. Marshal goes to their house, goes to their courthouse. And then Judge Shower later hearing says to me, Mr. Fishman, you sent Marshall to my house. She says, what do you have to do with that? I said, I should just throw you in jail right now. So I put up my hands. I said, put the cuffs on. My attorney nails them down. Donna speaks up. She says, what are you talking about? I said, Your Honor, I said, do you think I have the power to have a federal marshal do anything? She says, how do you explain 8 of them coming to my house? Oh, you mean Judge Karras had you served? He had to order the service for disability because I'm in informed purpose. It was his service. Oh, you don't like that? I'm sorry. Here, Judge Shower, I'm going to give you something you didn't give me. Professional courtesy. Here's Judge Shower's, here's Judge Ken Karras's assistant, Mary. Here's her phone number and her email. Feel free to call them. Unlike the forum where you don't let me speak and cut me off and deny me accommodations, I guarantee you Mary and Judge Karras will be patient with you and listen to your concern and address it. Feel free to tell them that you're complaining that he felt my lawsuit was legitimate enough to have you served by his marshals that work for him, not me, okay? And, you'll have an opportunity to be heard. Not like this courtroom where I can't even get 10 seconds in without you cutting me off. Mr. Fishman, everything you say is a lie. Tell me why I just shouldn't have you locked up again. I throw my hands up, What?
Wow.
Monster. And you know what? When I got the final order to appeal from Judge Shower? After I had my emergency hearing with Judge Karras and Office of Court Administration, the attorney was asked, when is Mr. Fishman going to get a final order he can appeal? I understand he's appealed what you say are temporary orders. When's he going to get the final order? And the court spokesman, the attorney, said, her name is Lisa Evans. She said she should have the order, maybe in a month. The judge says no. Try again. He needs to appeal this order. This has to end. He's been 49 months in front of this judge. Your rules require a final order. When's he going to final? You know what? We'll make sure he gets in 2 weeks. Judge said no. Judge goes to me, says, Mr. Fishman, this is married. Married is Mr. Fishman. Mr. Fishman, if you don't get an order by the middle of next week, you call me. And he goes, Lisa Evans, I was not going to sign this emergency order granting him his note taker. I was going to give you a shot. But if Mr. Fishman doesn't have that order by the middle of next week that he can appeal, this is going to get signed. Wow. And then Lisa Evans says, objection. I want to file a motion to dismiss. Sovereign immunity. Judge says denied. And she says, well, I'm going to file it anyway. And the judge says, no, young lady, this is my courtroom, my rules of procedure. I'm the federal judge. You need permission to file a motion to dismiss. Your permission request today is denied. I'll let you know when and if I give you permission to file your request denied. Mr. Fish, would you like to amend your lawsuit? Yeah, Your Honor. I'm having bleeding out of my colon. I'm having some tumors removed. Can I have a month? I don't see a problem with that. Ms. Evans, you got a problem with a month for Mr. Fishman to amend his lawsuit? Yeah, I do. I want to file a motion to dismiss. Denied. Mr. Fishman, you have your month. And that began 2.5 years, in front of Judge Karras, because, listen, most of these federal judges are decent. They want to help you if you're disabled. And, if you're polite, like I'm talking to you, and you're trying, and they see your effort, and they read these transcripts about how you're spoken to and all this, there is this issue of state sovereign immunity and court immunity, which is horrible. But guess what? According to the American Disabilities Act and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act and the vote of Congress, there is no immunity for states for denying access
I didn't
to a
know
court.
that.
The
That's
famous
important.
case, my friend Mike, is Tennessee versus Lane. Happy to say it was bipartisan, signed by Judge Stevens with Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Stephen Breyer, as well as Judge O'Connor, 5-4, that the states are required to accommodate disabled people, and there's no immunity. There's no judicial immunity, no state sovereign immunity for denying physical and mental communication, any accommodations for disabled people to a state courthouse. We don't need new law. We have the law. Just try and get enforced, Yeah,
Yeah.
go to federal court. What can I tell you?
Thank you for letting this audience know that. That's a huge thing. I wasn't aware of that. Again, thank you for letting me know that. And I want to remind everyone, because, again, there's so much to this story. Marc Fishman, he can be found at NewRochellePoliceAbuse.com. I have a question, though, because, again, with all the reading and everything at what point, was there any point where you just were like, what the hell is going on with my life? I mean, it's just like one day life is normal, I would imagine, and you're just doing your thing. Next thing you know, you are thrown into this unbelievable scenario. And there had to have been times where you're just going, what how the hell did this happen?
Listen, disability does run in my family. My father was born with a leg 8 inches long than the other. He spent 12 years in the hospital having surgeries to make them an equal length. My sister is learning disabled. My nephew has ADHD. My son is autistic. So, I've grown being around disabilities. I didn't know that I was disabled. And you mentioned how I've gotten tremendous, support. I have a great therapist. I have group therapy. I sought help of others. But, to answer your question, yeah, it was sort of like, when are these additional injuries going to end? When can I stop PT? When could I stop? And the truth of the matter is, it's a lifelong learning process. In 2014, 13, I didn't know I had post-concussion syndrome. Matter of fact, I was treating pain. Yeah, you had a concussion. No, we were treating pain. So if you're in pain, you're at physical therapy, you're on prescriptions. I was on Lyrica. I was on gabapentin. I was on cyclobenzaprine. What happened was that in late January, I just woke up, seeing shadows, and just didn't feel like myself. I called my therapist just to get to the ER, stop taking the pills. And what it turned out was, I was overdosing on Lyrica. They just raised the level from like 30 milligrams to almost 370. So if you know 370, it's like, so in between your fingers were red marks, their follicles, your hair were red. And basically you're overdosing on it. So cold turkey off 3 days in the hospital where you get the shakes like this. Wow. You're looking for answers. What's going to stop the pain? Oh, neurostimulator. I can put in a month. Let's do a temporary one. They had a temporary one that holds on my head and a patch. I felt for the first time in 8 months, no pain. So since then, it's been like, science isn't exact. I didn't know I had post-concussion syndrome. I quite frankly didn't know about the memory because everyone said you're fine. On most of these neuropsychologists, I was going to diagnostic neuropsychologists, not treating. And it wasn't until I saw the head of Albert Einstein, New York, the neurology department, and it took me 5.5 months in 16 to get an appointment. And when I saw him, he said, Mr. Fishman, you've had 14 surgeries. Your therapy is going great. You're really doing good. No disrespect, but why are you here? And I said to the guy, I said, look, you're the answer man. I said, I left my service dog at the ATM last week. It took me 45 minutes to remember. He was there. I came back. Luckily, he was there. I said, I drove the car around the mall, and then I couldn't find the car. I said, I can't find the keys to the apartment. I locked myself out. I can't find my papers. I keep taking down a number. It's opposite what it is. And then he says 5 words. Okay, so what you continue talking. And 45 minutes later, he says, can you please tell me the 5 words that I said to you? I said, I know you asked words. I have no idea what I said. He says, you have cognitive memory impairment. We can help you. I said, you know what this is? He says, yeah. He says, I can send you to Dr. Brown's. He said, we'll help you with your memory. You can grow new neurons. I said, you know what this is? You can help? Yeah. And that's how it started 2017, almost 4 years afterwards, to say, wow, yeah, no, you should have been in rehab from 13. Someone should have read the report for short-term memory that, you're going to continue failing. You're not going to remember a verbal order. Yeah, we can tell you now, you're definitely not. If you remember numbers, they're going to be backwards. It said, and, it was 4 or 5 hours a day, 6 days a week for about 2.5 years. And I can tell you that, you learn tools to learn how to try and grasp those names, those numbers, those dates. And you also, there's 700 people enrolled. You see people with Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, struggling, and then also how much improved they are. And you make, lifelong friends. And in my case, in group therapy, I had a team which, convinced me to sue in federal court after seeing the torture, and convinced me to do it pro se. Um, very emotional because half those people are dead today. But if I didn't sue, there wouldn't be that order, and thousands of people in New York wouldn't get accommodations. And the federal Second Circuit governs Vermont and Connecticut, as well as New York. So it's meaningful, and it's still horrible that I can't see my kids in court retaliates. But if we don't speak out and we don't tell our stories to help educate people, because I don't want anyone punished. Listen, I've been punished enough. I would love if that judge just had an epiphany moment, just thought how to be a decent, empathetic person, but empathy lacks in family court and government. They think you have your gotcha moment.
Yeah.
Actually was returned to that judge in April as retaliation. After a judge issued an order, a different one, to abate child support for what they call parent alienation. I was sent back to the judge. And I said, "You were removed by federal court. How are you here?" And she said, I was removed. I do what I want. I said, "This is all retaliation. What are you doing here?" And she says, "Oh, Ms. Fishman, I want to go over this federal order you have against me." I said, "You do?" I said, "I know you had jurisdiction, Your Honor." So here we are, virtually, Mike, right? And she's reading the order. It says, Marc Fishman versus New York Unified Court System, Judge Shower, Michelle D'Ambrosio. That's your court attorney, Your Honor. You got dismissed, but your court attorney didn't. Nancy Barry, that's the court administrator for the entire court system. 5 other judges, Dan Weiss, right? And it says, hey, Your Honor, what it says? It says, the communication accommodations for Mr. Fishman's disabilities are ordered to be provided. The court clerk will provide communication accommodations. That's it. So then Michelle Shower says, yeah, that's it. It doesn't say that order is binding in state court. It's only when you sue me in federal court. I said, Your Honor, are you telling me to sue you in federal court? No, I'm not telling you to do anything, but this order is only good in federal court. I said, you know what, Your Honor? I might not be the smartest person off the block, but the order just doesn't say that. And I said, card operator, Janice, can you please state your name and ID? She says, I said, Your Honor, why do you have a card reporter here if it's not provided? Mr. Fishman, everything you say is wrong. Your motion is denied. Matter of fact, I'm denying you access to the kids' school records. So she denied access to school records, retaliation. Right. Yeah. And she's still around, and she's so pompous and happy. And I just say, you're cruel, you lack empathy. And I said, I'm proud of myself for fighting. I can't believe I'm back here 7 years later, but this is what's going to take to spread awareness and to evict judges like you, legally from the court. Listen, I'll go back to federal court. We'll have you removed. You can lose that pension, the robe. Your Honor, I want to remind you, wearing the robe and carrying the judge emblem, that's an honor and privilege. It is not a right. Tomorrow is not promised. But look, I'm in federal court against your employer, New Rochelle. I'll be happy to tell the judge everything you're doing here. Matter of fact, I'll get the car reporter to give me the transcript because I probably won't remember half it anyway. But what you do is cruel, and what you've done to my 4 kids is cruel. And shame on you.
Wow. What are some of the victories that you've had through the court system that you're the most proud of, whether it be for you personally or maybe for the greater community of disabled? What are some of the highlights there?
Sure. So some of the highlights was during the COVID pandemic. I have a lot of tenants. I'm in property management and family and real estate. So I have a lot of tenants that were denied grants for unpaid rent when people were out during the pandemic, and a lot of them were denied. In New York, the application was 11 pages, double-sided, single-spaced. I don't know about you. I can't ring, 1 centimeter print. Single space, forget about it. One of the accommodations is give me 18 bold print, double space it. Well, I'm gonna understand it. I'm not gonna understand the other thing. It burns my eyes. I heard it, and they got a massive headache. So the bottom line is that I had like a group of 37 tenants properties that I managed and stuff, and they were denied, and they were denied an appeal. And so I went to the commissioner and the head of the office, disabilities, New York State, and I said I'd like these all to be reconsidered, and I'd like there to be accommodations for these people. I have some cancer victims, I have some heart disease victims, I have one hearing impaired tenant. I said they don't understand you for them. I said the one who's in chemotherapy, she can't even lift up her arm. How's she supposed to fill 11 pages? I said in California it's a page and a half. I said what's with this 11 pages? Well, Mr. Fishman, we'll consider it. No, that's denied. We can't, reconsider an order that's already denied an appeal. And I said, well, I'm asking for an accommodation. I'm not saying that it was legally denied because you didn't allow the person to apply a reasonable accommodation in the first place. They didn't have meaningful and effective communication. And, she said, well, it's denied. I'll speak to my supervisor. They called back. It's denied. I said, okay, I'm going to send you over the lawsuit I'm going to have to file in federal court to order the accommodations against New York State and say this is retaliation because I'm the manager and you're retaliating against tenants and disabled people, disabled owners, disabled managers. Really hope I don't do that, but you'll get FedEx in 2 days. Get the FedEx over there, get a call back. Mr. Fishman, please don't sue us. Your accommodations are approved. We're going to do verbal, in person, and over the internet applications. And over 90% of those applications were approved after the accommodation was given, even though we were told no. You're disabled. So unfortunately, no is told to us many, many times with insurance companies and government, and I can give you countless stories like that. No goes inside the ear and out the other one. Okay, it's no until you say yes. And again, I say this to insurance companies and state government. Those are the people I deal with. What does that mean? You're not going to approve it? We'll go to federal court. We'll go to Human Rights Commission. We'll go to the press. This is outrageous. You got to throw this person on the street. You're not going to pay her 15 months rent and utilities because she don't understand your application, or because he's had a heart attack, or no, this one's got long COVID. They're not even around. This is absurd. This is absolutely ridiculous. Well, this is the procedure. Well, you need accommodations. You're a state government. Read Title II of the ADA. You got to give us the preferred accommodation we request, as long as it's reasonable, isn't costly. It's reasonable, not costing any money. You have the employees. What's a phone call? What's an in-person visit? What's an interview? Is it really? Yeah. You're actually being cruel to some of these people who never get a grant because they're never able to meaningfully and effectively communicate with your cruel application. If you wanted to make it easy, you would have made it one page, half page. Half the stuff is verifiable online anyway. And then I went to them. I said, these people get disability rent increase exemptions, and a lot of them are senior citizens. So they're already in your state databases being disabled with their condition and their date of birth. So you guys just have to scroll with the mouse to one screen to the next, and you're telling me that my request is unreasonable? The fact that we're even having a conversation about you giving a rent grant to a disabled or senior is insulting. And if I'm not here to open up my big Jewish mouth, then who's going to say it for these people? And so, yeah, I'm very proud of that and others because, that was a 4-year federal deal to get that order. I've been in federal court with the police who falsely arrested me during supervised visitation now for 6.5 years. So, when you're able to convince someone that we don't have to go to court, we can all be friends, and you can accommodate people reasonably, and what we're asking for is not unreasonable, it's meaningful. It helps. And then you get reminded, you get this 10, like, wow, no one helped me. You got me $20,000. No one's ever helped me, Mark. I never won the lotto. I said, well, consider yourself lucky. I said, because God helped me, I'm alive, and a lot of my friends are dead with less injuries. So you're welcome.
Well, you're alive, and you have, again, I want to remind everyone, Marc Fishman, he'd be found at NewRochellePoliceAbuse.com. As you look forward to the future and everything you're doing, what you've already accomplished in the past, what are you looking forward to as you move forward?
Oh, I can't wait to be reunited with my kids. My youngest is 17 now. My eldest is 21. They've been kept from me with these ridiculous orders of protection. This is the way they keep disabled parents away. Disabled orders of protection. Violate it, we'll charge you with a felony. We'll lock you up again. And we have to stop the abuse. These orders of protection are given out like they're toilet paper. What are you protecting? What about an order of protection for me? I'm disabled. Protecting from harassment and insulting, having to advocate for accommodations, which in most states, are just granted, like you and I go to the bathroom and use toilet paper. Yeah. In 8 states, they have a law that disability cannot be used against you in divorce or family court. That's in California, where I'm at right now. And can you imagine? They actually have a state law to say it can't be used against you unless there's disability cannot be accommodated and there's extreme danger to the child from the disability. What extreme danger? You know, you tell me the paraplegic can't see their kid. Oh, he has his aid. She has his aid. What's the danger? Oh, they're going to run over the kid with the paraplegic. Well, he typically has 2 or 3 aids. No one's going to run over the kid. What about teaching our kids empathy? What are we teaching them by forced separation because you don't want my kid to be subjected to rashes or burning eyes, which I had early on with neuralgia, and my face turned red when I got a headache? Why? We should teach our kids accommodations so they could accommodate different people. We're all different, you know. It's cruel. We need to stop the family court mafia against disabled people and stop these order of protections which separate good parents. And some legislation going on with some of the movements, like Mark Ludwig and Francesca Bainfield, 2 advocates out there. It's important that we, speak to Congress and get laws. I want to compliment Robert Garza in Texas, who just had the 2 big wins in Texas. One of them was got the commission to review judges and remove them are now majority elected, not appointed by politicians, majority elected. So, if you're a judge and you discriminate, they're going to evict you. Because they'll be elected from people. And they also had an amendment in the Texas Constitution to reinforce parental rights. Amen to that. I want to thank Robert Garza. So, we try to do our share because this system of family court and divorce court pattern rampant discrimination has to end. It's amazing. You're a disability survivor. Why are we even having these conversations? What do we have to go to jail for? What do we have to sue in federal court for? In my case, medical history is fine. I'll never be able to buy life insurance again. Hey, but my point to you is, why do I have to expose my whole history to get an order for an accommodation? Yeah. And why do I have a wise ass judge tell me the order is only good in federal court? It doesn't say that, and the state agreed to follow the order. I said to Judge Shower, though, you're more than welcome. You had 90 days. The rest of us who aren't in a row, we only get 30 days to appeal on federal second circuit. But if you wanted to appeal to the Supreme Court, Your Honor, you had 90 days. You didn't appeal. So the order's against you. By the way, your name there. And your assistant was served. And she was defended by the Attorney General. The same Attorney General, Letitia James, let's not forget, who also found the pattern misconduct, Lane Schlesinger, the cop who arrested me during supervised visitation, fired for pattern misconduct. But in the pattern misconduct report, Mike, which again is on NewRochellePoliceAbuse.com, my case isn't mentioned. My case is the only reason the guy was referred. My case isn't mentioned because she's protecting Judge Shower, who told Lane Schlesinger to arrest me for not committing a crime during supervised visitation. Wow. But I have the only cop in Westchester, 1.1 million people, Westchester, the county, North New York, to be pattern misconduct, false arresting, 5 instances. But mine is not mentioned from Attorney General James. Attorney General James, who committed mortgage fraud 6 times. That means you lied on a document, and you're not a layman. You understand you lie. You lied for your rental property as opposed to being owner occupant. If I do that as a real estate professional, I lose my license. So you, as an attorney general, should know better. But you should be doing impartial investigations, not covering up and protecting, rogue disability discrimination cops. And again, we're still in federal court, so unfortunately, a lot of these politicians unite together against you lately. It's like us versus them. What satisfaction do you have is fighting me as a disabled person? You hate the fact that I got you pub and TV, Judge Shower, and Judge Oliver Gordon and Judge Greenwald, that you discriminate. You threw my note taker out of the room or didn't allow him or her entry. You're proud. You got to retaliate against me. You retaliate with a batting in my chest when my life expectancy is how many years? This gives you satisfaction. This gives you fun. You think like we're playing, cops and robbers. Maybe we're playing like Galaxy. I have no fun in calling all of these so-called elected officials disability discriminators. It's very dishonorable. But until we educate and stop the abuse, it's going to continue because unfortunately they claim immunity, and we're just going to accept the fact that we're going to lose our kids, or we're just going to lose in family court. No. We'll not accept any of this. We'll see you in federal court. We'll see you in human rights hearing. We'll see you on TV. Fight for your rights. So those of us who have a big mouth like me, even after the jaw surgeries, and you got to use it. God gave it to you for a reason.
Absolutely. And you were talking about some of the voices, and I think yours is one of the biggest and brightest. And thank you for everything you're doing for the disabled community. Mark, I can't thank you enough for being a guest on the We're Not Stumped podcast. And as we move forward, as you move forward and make progress, I'd love to have you back on to discuss some of the other victories you're having and some of the other things people should be looking at when they go to family court. Mark, thank you so much for being a guest.
Thank you, Mike, for having me on. And for those who want to follow, we are awaiting a decision from our highest court in New York. We're expecting it by Friday, whether the highest court will take my case. We hope and pray Judge Conatera, one of our 7 highest judges, will, but you can follow NewRochellePoliceAbuse.com and hope that the state court takes up the issue of disability discrimination in place of public accommodation. But thank you again, and thanks for all you do for advocating for the disabled. It means a lot to us. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Well, here we are at the end of another great podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I bet you're wondering, gosh, I'd like to be on that podcast. I wonder if Mike would like to have me on. Well, why don't you go to we'reNotStumped.com, go to guest inquiries, and you can find out everything you need to know about being a guest on this podcast. I would love to have you on. And by the way, if you made it this far, if you went down this far to this point of the We're Not Stumped podcast, do me a favor. Like, share, and subscribe. Especially share it. Come on, you got friends. You got at least one friend. You have as many friends as I have hands, so you have one friend. Please share this podcast. Thank you.